should we move on to Terry's then and see what Terry's here to talk about? And it's about like growing your business in different and like exciting ways, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is anyone that knows me knows that I'm very shy and reserved, and I don't like being live on anything. So just bear with me if I get a little bit twitchy. First of all, thank you for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to be here in the esteemed presence of such wonderful people. Speaking about different ways and different approaches we can take to our businesses and the first thing I'm going to say, actually, I'm going to roll back to something you were at the start about referring to these as TED Talks. I do think we should call them TED Talks going forward. I think that's the way. I'm going to speak about two things, and feel free to chuck in any comments or questions, and I'll probably miss them, so I'll come back to them at the end either way. But I'm going to speak about how we can take a different approach towards sort of the learner side of things, and how we can take a different approach towards almost the business and the instructor side of things. And I think the first thing I want to touch on is the fact that what I hear a lot and what I've said before and what I'm sure a lot of you say in here as well is this idea that we can, first and foremost, just rely on referrals for customers. We rely on reviews and recommendations. And even more so at the minute where we've just got this massive demand that's far outweighing supply. We, as an industry, we could almost just stop any form of advertising and still get by for the next 6, 9, 12 months, just with the demand that's there in terms of students. But I think we can break that down into two sections of, firstly, what happens after that? What happens when that demand dries up? Either because we get through the backlog, or because the learners are starting to take more and more lessons with their parents, or because the number of PDIs and ADIs goes up because people are seeing an opportunity there to come in and make the most of this demand. So it's looking what happens after, but also what happens in the meantime. So one of the benefits of, just to clarify, when I talk about advertising here, I'm not necessarily talking about paid advertising. I'm talking about the voice that you have, whether that's on social media or an emailing list or a YouTube channel or whatever it might be. So when I'm referring to advertising, it's not always paid advertising, but by advertising, by talking, one of the things that we do is we filter people out straight away. And I'm going to give an example here in that I used to work with a national driving school that I won't mention because I've only been doing this about 5 years. And the first 3 years of doing it, I was with this national driving school, and no complaints about them, just to clarify. But a lot of the customers, the learners that I got, weren't my type of people. We didn't fall out, we didn't argue. It's just they wouldn't have chosen to come and have a pint with me, and I wouldn't have chosen to go and have a pint with them. So no dispute, it was a bit like that at times. And it was when I left that driving school that I started getting a different type of learner. And it was the learners that were choosing me, because before they would choose a driving school and then the driving school would send them to me. So there was a buffer in between. But then the learners started choosing me, and they were choosing me because I was on Facebook. I was doing videos. I was doing lives. I was making my posts more engaging. I was talking about people when they're passed out. I created a Facebook group, and not just Facebook, but on different social media platforms. So they were seeing the way I worked and coming to me. And another example of that, and this isn't a slight on anyone when I say this, but I saw a driving school make a post about the way they teach, and they spoke about if they deliver a 60-minute lesson, 58 minutes of that lesson you'll be driving. They're not pulling up at the side of the road, they're not talking, they're not chatting, they're not engaging like that. It's just driving. And that's how they were selling their school. And there's nothing wrong with that, each to their own. I can remember reading that and just thinking, that's not, for me, that's not what I would want if I was a learner. I learn through discussion. That's how I work best, and I learn through watching people. So I wanted to look at a different way for that. So I thought, if I learn that way, there'll be other people that learn that way. So I did an alternative post speaking about the way I would teach, and that if you want to pull up for 90 minutes of a 2-hour lesson and discuss stuff, we'll do that. I have no problem doing that. And that was one of the most engaging posts I had. in terms of the comments and in terms of the customer I got through it. And that's how I've been since. And that's not saying I'm right and they're wrong. It's saying people are different. So by putting that voice out and putting the way I am across on social media, I'm filtering out people that don't want to come to me. For example, Chris said before about the LGBTQ plus community. I speak about that on my page. I have the pride flag on my page at the minute. I don't want homophobic people in my car. I don't want transphobic people in my car. Guess what? They see that pride flag, they're not coming to me. It filters them out straight away. So by talking in a certain way, we're filtering people out. So by advertising in that way, not only are we having the long-term benefits, which I'll come back to, but we're having the immediate benefits of getting customers and learners that are more appropriate to you, that are more likely to engage in you, engaged in the lessons. But what else can we do now to prepare us for when that drop-off happens in custom, which it will do at some point, probably. I might be proved wrong there. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff we can do, and we've got to think about what can we do differently? How can we make an impression? You know, why can't we, or why can't you, why can't I go and contact our local community Facebook group? So I live in Baildon. I could contact my Baildon community Facebook group, which got about 11,000 people in, and say, right, every Thursday at 7 p.m, can I host a live in here, not promoting my driving school, just helping people with their theory test, helping people with driving test questions, helping people with the legalities around driving. Parents can come in and ask me questions. I can do that. You know, if I did that consistently, when it comes to time for those parents, for their kids to have lessons, who are they going to come to? Are they going to come to me that have been watching for 9 months, that I've engaged with and they're buying into? Or are they going to come to someone their Auntie Doris recommends because their instructor passed someone else? You know, it's creating that engagement. And it's not just Facebook groups. You could make your own Facebook group. I've got one for my learners. You could make one a community Facebook group. So again, I could make the Baildon Community Learners Group, where anyone in Baildon that's learning to drive can come and join, and I can offer some advice and you know, potentially even words of wisdom in there. It doesn't have to be Facebook. Again, there's other social media that you could create a WhatsApp group, a big WhatsApp group where people come and help each other. And again, who's the face of it? It's you. So you're then almost the go-to person in your community. So yes, that may take a little bit of time. It might take an hour or two of your week or whatever, but think about what you're doing. It's free advertising. You're taking the time, but you're not paying anything for it. And again, 6, 9, 12 months time, more people are going to come to. There's all the social media as well. So you've got your TikTok, you've got your Snapchats, you've got your Twitter, you've got your Instagrams, got your LinkedIn, you've got Discord and Reddit, all this stuff that you could go and essentially just dominate. Then there's schools. So with schools, again, why couldn't you be the instructor that arranges to go into a school every Thursday and deliver a 30-minute or an hour? It could be a theory training, it could be road safety, it could be anything. To, again, it could be the 16-year-olds that have got the driving coming up. So they're getting ready for their learning before they've even started learning. That could be a key one, or it could be the 17, 18-year-olds, the sixth formers. You could have once a month a cockpit drill lesson in the school car park, you know, potentially. Could even get some of the guys in the car giving you demonstrations. I know you can't drive around in it possibly, but, you know, they could be doing the cockpit drill session. And yes, it's taking time, but again, think about the long-term benefits. And just touching back on what I was saying, using your voice in social media. So by doing that and doing the community stuff and the school stuff or whatever it is else you want to do, you're laying the foundations, laying the platforms for when this stuff drops off in 6, 9, 12 months time, whatever it is, and you're the go-to person, not just relying on referrals, but relying on what you've done. Beyond that, you can then turn that into your advantage as well, because then you've got a voice in your community. You've got people that are coming to you that are asking you questions. So you could then actually start taking that further and make an income from that. You know, why not create a theory test training course? Why not have Zoom training sessions for the theory or for the cockpit drill? You know, that was some of that stuff was done over lockdown with people doing theory tests, driving lessons over Zoom. Parent training, there's people now creating courses to help parents train their kids. You know, it's the way we're going. More and more people are training their kids or training their partners because the instructors there aren't available. And And the other one, just thinking outside the box again, I'm going to throw something I did, something I called Fairy Club, which was, I advertised it to my students. I paid 40 quid for a month. And essentially what it was every Sunday at 7 p.m, I did a Zoom call. They come on, we set their goals for the week. And that could be that they were potentially doing some reading the highway code, or doing mock tests, or doing the theory course, or whatever it might be. They'd all set their individual goals for the week. Now, these guys paid 40 quid for that month, and I got 10 of them on it. That, you know, you do the maths there. That's a nice little figure for very little work from me. Now, yes, I had to lay the foundations. I had to advertise it. I had to create the theory course to begin with. But it's there. There's no reason why you couldn't do that, A, for your students, or B, if you've already conquered your community, get your community in. You know, you make 400 quid a month with 10 people doing that. There's a way to do that. So again, going back to what I was saying, by laying all those foundations, by getting into the community, by being the go-to person in your community, you can then sell that. And when you're selling that, well, yes, all those extra hours suddenly seem worth it. And if you're making an extra £400 a month, potentially you can work 4 hours less a week, which you can then reinvest back into what you're doing. And I think that's a shift in mindset. And I think that's something I had to shift my mindset on. And if I'm being honest, it's probably a shift that a lot of us as instructors need to shift as mindset on. You know, those of you that know me, I do a podcast. A lot of people come on there and talk about, we stuck 20 years ago in our industry, and I think there's an element of that there. And I'm not saying everyone, so don't shoot me down for saying that, but that's all the different ways that we can look at it. And there's more than that. You know, that's off the top of my head. That's from my ideas book, by the way. You feel free to steal them. I'm going to shift it over to the more of the business side and the instructor side, because when we look at being an instructor, there's not many people I know that, thinking back to when I went to school, which was a long old time ago, it's getting longer every day, that when you were asked, you know, your career's lesson or whatever, what do you want to be when you get older? Not many people went, please, sir, I want to be a driving instructor. You know, it's not something that many people choose to be. There's probably some of us say, feel free to shoot me down. But we fall into it for different reasons. And not everyone that falls into it is lucky enough to have a background in running your own business. So you fall into it, and all of a sudden you just think you're going to teach people to drive, but you've got all this other stuff to do. And we tend to follow the well-trodden path, which I nearly did, which is you become a PDI, you become an ADI, and then you run a franchise. And again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. I nearly did it. The reason I didn't is because I suddenly realized it wasn't for me. And the reason I was doing it was because that's what everyone does. And I just thought, this is what we do as instructors, so this is what I'm going to do. And it got to the point where I was actually advertising to take on PDIs and ADIs. And I suddenly realized this isn't what I want to do. So I switched tact, and I'll come back to what I did in a moment. But we don't have to follow that well-trodden path. Much like the learner stuff, we don't have to go down that one route. We can go wherever we want. You're not limited to this. So it could be we go down the route of training PDIs. You don't have to take them on in a franchise. Could just train them, become audit registered, train them. It could be that you help ADIs, whether that's with standard check training, or even, as I mentioned before, the business side of it, because we're not trained in that. It's, you know, I was lucky that I ran my own business before. I ran a carpentry and joinery business. So I was able to bring some of those business skills over, but a lot of people haven't. So you have to come and adapt. So that's something that you could potentially market, rather than saying, I'm going to teach you coaching, I'm going to teach you standard checks. I'm going to teach you how to run this business. I'm going to teach you how to manage social media, whatever it might be. We don't have to fixate on that one thing. You can also go on to things like creating online training, which I know people are doing. I mentioned before about the courses coming out that are helping parents train. Why couldn't you create courses to help train PDIs, ADIs, whether it's, again, the coaching, whether it's the standards check, whether it's their business, whether it's social media? There's no reason why you can't do this stuff. And again, I'm not advising you do it all. That's probably not the best option. Pick one, go for that. And then the other one, I don't mean to be too flippant when I say this one, but writing books. I think Chris mentioned before about the books that have come out from lockdown. People have had time to do it. And there's some good ones. I've read some of them, not all of them yet. They're all on my list, by the way. But there's some good ones out there. They're very similar. And I don't mean any disrespect when I say this. Again, I've not read them all. They've all got the unique points and come at stuff from a slightly different angle. But why couldn't someone do a book about the horror stories of being a driving instructor? And by that, I mean the comical horror stories, because even when you filter out your students, you still get the occasional nightmare one come through. Why couldn't someone write the book about the funny? There's a group called The Funny Side of Being a Driving Instructor. Admittedly, it's not always that funny, but whatever. It's, someone could do a book about that. It doesn't have to be about the standard same thing that we get books about over and over again. I mentioned magazines. It could be online, which is essentially the way people are going. But I think there's two out, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's two out that I think are both associated with the associations. And again, nothing wrong with that. Like reading them both. But it's, why couldn't someone create one that isn't tied with an association, that takes a different approach to it? Again, I've kind of thrown a lot of examples about there, but it doesn't have to be this, do this, do this, do this. Just try something different. And the other thing I want to touch on with this is the people that complain online. Now, there's nothing wrong with a good complaint. We all like doing it. I've probably done it a little bit on this episode, this podcast. No, I'm not doing an episode, am I? This webinar that I'm doing now, that shows where my brain's at. But there's a difference between complaining and being constructive. So if you're complaining and saying something along the lines of, we should all join a union, or I wish someone would form this new association that would look after us, do it. Don't tell people you wish you could do it. Do it. Find out how to do it. And I'm going to throw some credit here towards Chris Spencer. And yes, it does stick in my throat saying that. But, he spotted the gap in the market for the DITC, the Driving Instructor and Trainers Collective. He spotted the gap in the market for that. And he took it. And it became the signposting platform for the industry. And because there was a space for it. And he thought there was a need for it. So rather than sitting there and moan about it, it did something about it. Again, I'm not saying don't moan, it can be fun sometimes. I think there's a group for that as well. But it's, and I love it, by the way, so I'm not going to go on a big rant about that, but just do it. When you see that weak point, you see the opportunity, then you don't have to be the biggest. You don't have to be the best. You can just be different. It can be an alternative. And I'm going to come back to my thing now, because it's probably the thing I can talk the most about, because I'm not the most experienced driving instructor. Again, 5 years. I'm not the best coach. I don't have the experience of, or the expertise or the experience of anyone that's currently above me as I look at it, right? But I do have something, and that's I've just become a world-class podcaster. I'm going to throw that out there. And I spotted a gap, because Dipod are out there, which I love. I love Dipod. I started listening to them when I first became an instructor, and they were almost my little support network when I first become a PDI, ADI. But they're monthly. Well, I like my podcast regular. So I'm looking, and when I finally put up the courage, part of it was, well, I want to do something weekly. I don't want to have to wait a month for a podcast. And then the Did podcast from Mick Knowles come about, and he was fortnightly. I think he's gone weekly now, but he was fortnightly. And by the way, I recommend you listen to both of these, because they're both awesome in their own rights. But that was fortnightly at first, I believe. So for me, I'm still thinking I want more than fortnightly. And I wanted to promote other people. I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted to promote other instructors and other experts. So that's what I did. I saw the opportunity and I went for it. And now that show's twice weekly. Today, just a little tidbit for you. Today, I released my 100th podcast episode. I only started in March, I think it was. So I've done all right. And that's because I saw the opportunity. I think Chris spoke about it before, almost about seeing the opportunity. The reason why you get asked why he's on Sky all the time is because he says yes. We don't even have to say yes. You can just do it. So you see the opportunity and take it. And I've given probably about 6 dozen here. Half of them will be nonsense to you because they won't be applicable to you. But there's no reason why you have to do anything I've said here. Find your own. That's it. Find your own. I'm going to finish that. I'm going to wrap up on one I'm going to repeat the quote, and if you've got any comments, any questions, feel free. But you don't have to be the biggest. You don't have to be the best. You can just be different and be a bit of an alternative. That's it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I think there's a really good point there. Is like there's so many opportunities to be had, right? And no one can do them all. It's about picking one, focusing on that, and doing it with passion, right?
Yeah, and even with yourselves with GoRoadie, you came on my podcast and you spoke about it there that your initial stuff, the getting the pupils to students,
Yep,
wasn't great during lockdown. So where's the opportunity? Yeah. So
yeah.
your opportunity was right. Okay, well, the apps aren't great.
Yeah.
You know, I can build a bigger, better app, so I'm going to go and do this.
Yeah.
I saw an opportunity. Do you want a resource to go on it? The 5 Minute Failure podcast? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, that's now going out to every student that signs up to GoRoadie. It's in the resources there. So there's absolutely nothing wrong, because the worst anyone's ever going to say is no. You know, now and again, you get a little bit of abuse online. Well, generally, now and again, the people that get abuse online are generally arseholes.
Excellent. All the swearing this evening.
I've toned it down.
No, that's good. That's good. Do you guys have any questions? Any other questions from the group or the viewers?
Just recovering from the last comment.
What was that, Bob?
It's just about the people who complain. I'm not disagreeing with Terry, by the way. I think he's right. But
I think there's nothing wrong with people. I complain. I've complained about people complaining. You know, I complain. There's nothing wrong with it. I think it's how you complain. You know, I try and be very careful with how I put posts up about my podcast, because I put them in two of the groups that people run above me, Chris and Bob. But I've checked with you both. I checked with you. Can I post this here when I have new episodes? And you both okayed it. But one of the things I've noticed recently is when people moan, they're moaning but not listening to the episode. Yeah. I'm like, well, what are you moaning about? At least listen to it and then come back and tell me it's no good. I've no problem with that. Yeah. You know, everyone's entitled to opinion. I say every time, I'm always after feedback. But you can't really give me feedback if you haven't listened to it. If you listen to it first 10 minutes and decide I'm really annoying, then that's fine. That's good feedback. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, yeah. No, like I've experienced that firsthand. I remember posting in one of the groups. I can't remember whose group it was, but it was like someone's group, and I posted a 700 word. Was it your group? Right, yeah. So I posted a 700 word essay on something on waiting lists, I think, and then there was a small ad at the bottom about GoRoadie Pro, and I just got so much crap for it, and I was just like, there was a 700, and they're like, you're just advertising. It's like, well, there's a huge article here you can read, or you can read the small thing at the bottom. It's like up to yourself. It's like, yeah. So yeah, fun times.
We get a lot of that though, don't we, in our industry, where people are just negative for the sake of it. I've got no problem with anybody disagreeing with what I've got to say, just like Terry said. It's like, if you've read what I've got to say, you've listened to what I've got to say, and you say, well, I don't agree with it, that's totally fine. It's not my job to convince you. It's my job to tell you what I believe. And it's also my job to listen to what you believe and then make my own mind up, because, you know, if I'm listening, I might learn something.
Absolutely.
And can I just share the thing that I've appreciated more since working with Terry is finding someone that gets what you're on about, is on a similar wavelength, and you can steal their ideas. And you can work with. But they can support you and find a mentor. So if there's something you want to do, if you want to do a podcast, speak to Terry, because he's blooming good at them. I'm going to be the one that doesn't swear today. And you know, if you want someone who, if you want to write a book, speak to Sammy, speak to Kathy Higgins, speak to Dave Shannon. You know, the three books that I put in the chat. You know, speak to someone who's written a book. There's a really good book by Daniel Priestley, I want to say. Terry, you know him. Is that right? Yeah.
Sounds right.
KPI, key person of interest. If you want a formula to do what Terry's just spoken about, you can go a lot worse. And he does free training. So I've you know, been in a couple of his rooms, and it's worth it. If you want that focus on, say, everything that he's just covered, I would start there.
I just want to touch on a couple of comments here if I can.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
Someone says not Confessions of an ADI. I think we should have a book called The Confessions of an ADI, or a TV series of that. I think that could be interesting. I'm not going to mention too much about Gavin Brownley's comment because I'm not the best to comment on that. I'll leave that to the experts, again, as above me as I look at them. But I do also want to mention the first comment, which was cough, Terry. This is my voice, right? I did a 6-hour live a few days ago. It's not getting better than this.
Perfect. No, thank you very much, Terry. That's absolutely brilliant. Should we take just a couple of minutes and then we'll move on to myself interviewing Howard Floyd about growing his driving school. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to just fill up my water bottle and I'll be back in 2 seconds, I guess. Thank you.
So we can
of
talk.
course speak
Do we
amongst
get to
ourselves.
talk amongst ourselves?
It's song and dance time. Isn't it?
How do you give us a song, Bob?
No, you made that up.
How you doing, Howard?
I'm good. Hello, everyone. Sorry I'm late to the party.
You money
But,
grabber.
Actually,
Money
I'm missing,
grabber.
obviously. No, I was working late, just got in, rushing around. So yeah, good to see you all. Yeah.
Yes, you too.
Yeah. Has anyone got any good Michael Carr stories?
I could make one up.
Invite Barry.
It's interesting, some of the stuff there. I'll pick up on the stuff that Gavin's put in. He said most ADIs don't know how to teach. They don't understand how to teach. They instruct and fix faults. That's not teaching. Interesting. And it's, I'm sure that's a view that Gavin's held for the longest time. And that's always been the case. It doesn't matter. I think people used to judge themselves on being a really good instructor if they could deliver an 8-minute brief and include everything they knew about the subject. Well, how's that relevant? You can both do the teaching, you and the learner, but only one of you can do the learning. And I think that's what Gavin's alluding to there, that, you got to make sure learning happens. That's the measure.
Can I object?
Yeah.
I've learnt more on driving lessons than I have anywhere else. And I always think you can both learn, and actually being open to it is a really good conduit to getting learning happening.
Key there is, though, isn't it, that you put yourself in the mode of learner as well as teacher. And that's key as well, isn't it? Opening the old channel.